Imagine waking up before sunrise. The room is silent, the world outside is still asleep, yet inside your mind, a storm has already begun. Before your feet touch the floor, your thoughts are racing. What if today goes wrong? What if I fail? What if something bad happens? What if I'm not enough? Your heart beats a little faster, your chest feels tighter, nothing dangerous has happened. No crisis stands before you, and yet your body reacts as though it is preparing for battle. Why? Because the mind has a remarkable ability. It can suffer over events that have never happened. It can fight enemies that do not exist. It can exhaust itself trying to solve problems that may never arrive. Now ask yourself a simple question. How much of your life have you spent worrying about moments that never came true? Perhaps more than you realize. Think about all the nights you couldn't sleep because of tomorrow, the conversations you rehearsed hundreds of times, the mistakes you imagined before taking your first step, the future you feared, only to discover later that life unfolded in a completely different way. Anxiety has a strange way of convincing us that worrying is a form of preparation. It whispers, if you think about every possible disaster, you'll be safe. But does endless worry truly protect you? Or does it quietly steal the only moment you actually possess, this one? Imagine carrying a heavy backpack during a long journey. Inside are stones. Each stone has a name: the future, failure, rejection, money, health, other people's opinions. Every day you add another stone. You convince yourself that carrying them makes you responsible, prepared, careful. Yet as the years pass, the backpack becomes so heavy that you forget what it feels like to walk freely. Many of us live exactly this way. We don't just carry today's challenges, we carry tomorrow's possibilities. Yesterday's regrets and fears that belong to no day at all. The Stoics recognized this long before modern psychology existed. They understood that the greatest prison is often not built from iron, but from imagination. More than 2,000 years ago, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal during wars, plagues, political betrayal, and uncertainty. Despite leading one of the most powerful empires in history, he reminded himself of one timeless truth. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Notice what he didn't say. He didn't promise a life without uncertainty. He didn't promise that fear would disappear forever. He simply reminded himself where true strength begins inside. Imagine standing on a beach watching waves crash against the shore. Can you stop the ocean? Can you command the wind? Can you tell the tide to move backward? Of course not. Yet every day we try to do something equally impossible. We try to control uncertainty. We demand guarantees from life. We seek absolute certainty in a world that has never offered it, and when certainty refuses to come, anxiety quietly moves in. There is an old story about a young traveler crossing a mountain path. As dark clouds gathered overhead, he became terrified. What if the bridge collapses? What if wild animals appear? What if I lose my way? The elderly guide walking beside him smiled and asked, "Has any of that happened?" "No, then why are you already suffering?" The traveler had no answer. Hours later, they crossed the bridge safely. No wild animals appeared. The path remained clear. The suffering had been real, but the danger had existed only in his imagination. How often do we repeat that same journey? Psychologists explain that anxiety is not simply fear. It is the anticipation of fear. The brain constantly scans for possible threats. Thousands of years ago, this instinct helped our ancestors survive dangerous environments. Hearing rustling in the bushes could mean a predator. Preparing for danger kept them alive. Today, however, that same survival system often responds to emails, deadlines, social situations, financial uncertainty, or conversations that haven't even happened yet. The body cannot always distinguish between an imagined threat and a real one. It responds to both. Your heart races. Your breathing changes. Stress hormones increase. Even while you sit safely in your own home. There is another story about a wise old gardener. Every morning he quietly watered his plants before sunrise. One day, a young neighbor asked, "How can you stay so calm? Don't you worry about storms destroying your garden?" The old man smiled. "If the storm comes, I will meet it then. But why don't you worry now?" Because worrying today doesn't water tomorrow's flowers. Those words contain extraordinary wisdom. Anxiety convinces us that today's worry somehow improves tomorrow. Reality quietly teaches something different. Today's peace prepares you far better than today's panic ever could. Seneca once observed that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about that. Not sometimes, often. How many fears dissolve the moment they become reality? How many sleepless nights were spent preparing for problems that never arrived? Imagine sitting beside a calm lake. The surface reflects the sky perfectly. Now throw handfuls of stones into the water. The reflection disappears. The lake hasn't lost its ability to reflect. It has simply become disturbed. Your mind works the same way. Constant worry doesn't destroy your wisdom. It merely clouds your ability to see clearly. The Stoics believed that clarity returns not by controlling the world, but by calming the mind that observes it. Over the next chapters, we'll explore why anxiety feels so convincing, how psychology explains overthinking, and how Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca developed extraordinary calm in the middle of uncertainty, hardship, and chaos. Because perhaps the greatest battle you will ever fight is not against the world outside you. It is against the fearful voice within. And the beautiful truth is this: that voice, no matter how loud it becomes, does not have to become your master. You can learn to observe it without obeying it. You can learn to breathe without believing every fearful thought. You can learn to stand calmly in the middle of uncertainty. And when you do, you will discover that peace was never waiting for the world to become predictable. It was waiting for your mind to become still. Have you ever noticed that anxiety rarely speaks about the present? It whispers about tomorrow, next week, next year. It creates stories about possibilities. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if I lose everything? What if something terrible happens? Notice the pattern. Anxiety doesn't deal in facts, it deals in possibilities. And the human mind has an incredible ability to mistake possibilities for certainty. Imagine walking through a long hallway at night. At the far end, you see a shadow. Your heart immediately begins to race. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your muscles tighten. For a moment, your mind convinces you that someone is standing there. You slowly move closer. The mysterious figure never moves. Finally, you reach the end of the hallway. It's only a coat hanging on a chair. The danger was never real, but your fear certainly was. This is how anxiety often works. The body reacts first. Reason arrives later. Psychologists explain that anxiety begins with a simple purpose: to protect you. Your brain is constantly asking one question: what could go wrong? Thousands of years ago, this question kept our ancestors alive. Those who noticed danger early survived. Those who ignored danger often didn't. The human brain evolved to detect threats, not happiness. This explains why one negative thought can overpower 10 positive ones. Imagine a smoke detector in your home. Its purpose is to warn you of fire, but what if it became too sensitive? What if it sounded the alarm every time you cooked dinner? Every time you lit a candle? Every time steam filled the bathroom? Eventually, you would begin living in constant stress. Nothing dangerous would actually be happening, but your alarm system would convince you otherwise. For many people, anxiety is like that overly sensitive smoke detector. It isn't broken. It's simply working harder than necessary. The Stoics understood this long before neuroscience existed. Epictetus wrote, "We suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgments about them." Think carefully about those words. Your mind doesn't simply react to reality. It reacts to the story it tells about reality. Imagine receiving an email from your manager. It says, "Can we talk tomorrow?" Nothing more. Immediately, your imagination begins writing an entire movie. I'm in trouble. I'm going to lose my job. I must have made a mistake. You struggle to sleep. You replay every recent conversation. The next morning arrives. Your manager smiles and says, "I wanted to discuss your promotion." One short message. Two completely different realities. The event never caused your suffering. The story did. There is an old story about a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors rushed over. What terrible luck. The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned with 3 wild horses. "What wonderful luck!" Again, the farmer answered, "Maybe." Soon afterward, his son fell while training one of the horses and broke his leg. Again, the neighbors declared it a disaster. The farmer calmly said, "Maybe." A week later, soldiers arrived to recruit every healthy young man for war. Because of the broken leg, his son stayed home. The neighbors celebrated the family's good fortune. The farmer smiled. Maybe. The story reminds us of something profound. We rarely know what today's events truly mean. Anxiety assumes the worst long before life has finished writing the story. Another psychological habit that fuels anxiety is called catastrophic thinking. One small problem becomes a disaster. One mistake becomes failure. One disagreement becomes the end of a relationship. One uncertain future becomes proof that everything will collapse. Imagine dropping a single glass into a sink. It breaks, annoying. Yes, but anxiety whispers, this is only the beginning. Everything is falling apart. Notice how quickly the mind moves from one event to an imagined future that doesn't exist. Marcus Aurelius practiced something entirely different. Whenever difficulties appeared, he asked himself, what is happening right now? Not tomorrow, not next month, not next year, right now. This simple question brought him back to reality. Reality is often far kinder than imagination. Imagine climbing a mountain covered in thick fog. You cannot see the summit. You cannot see the path beyond the next few steps. An anxious mind refuses to move. I need to see the whole journey first, but life doesn't work that way. The experienced climber simply takes the next safe step, then another. Eventually, the fog begins to lift. The Stoics believed wisdom grows exactly this way, not by demanding certainty, but by learning to trust the next step. Seneca observed that people often rehearse suffering before it arrives. It's as though we watch the same frightening movie hundreds of times, only to discover the ending is completely different. How many arguments have you replayed that never happened? How many failures have you imagined that never came? How many sleepless nights have been spent worrying about a future that quietly solved itself? There is another story about a young musician preparing for her first public performance. Weeks before the concert, she imagined every possible mistake, forgetting the notes, falling on stage, being laughed at by the audience. By the night of the performance, she was exhausted not from playing the music, but from fighting imaginary disasters. Afterward, her teacher asked, "How many of those fears came true?" "None." "And how much energy did they steal?" "Almost all of it." That is anxiety's greatest deception. It convinces us that constant worrying is the price of being prepared. In reality, it often steals the strength we need when real challenges finally arrive. Imagine holding a snow globe. When you shake it constantly, tiny flakes fill the water. Everything becomes cloudy. The harder you shake it, the less clearly you can see. Now set it gently on a table without forcing anything. The snow slowly settles. The water becomes clear again. Your mind works the same way. Peace is not always created by adding more thoughts. Often it appears when unnecessary thoughts are finally allowed to settle. As we continue this journey, we'll discover how Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca cultivated extraordinary calm while facing war, illness, political betrayal, and uncertainty. They did not possess lives free from fear. They possessed minds trained not to surrender to it, because courage is not the absence of anxious thoughts. It is the quiet decision to keep walking, even while those thoughts whisper, and with every calm step forward. You teach your mind a truth it has forgotten, that you are stronger than the stories fear keeps trying to tell. Imagine standing in the middle of a violent storm. The wind howls through the trees, thunder shakes the sky, rain crashes against the earth with unstoppable force. Now imagine looking toward the center of the storm. There, everything is strangely calm. The greatest lesson of Stoicism is not that storms disappear. It is that you can become the calm center within them. Many people spend their lives trying to eliminate uncertainty. The Stoics chose a different path. They learned to become steady even when uncertainty remained. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than almost anyone. History remembers him as one of Rome's greatest emperors, but his life was far from peaceful. He faced devastating wars that lasted for years. Deadly plagues swept through the empire. Political betrayal surrounded him. People questioned his decisions. Friends died. Enemies gathered at the borders. If anyone had a reason to become consumed by anxiety, it was Marcus Aurelius. Yet every evening, instead of surrendering to fear, he wrote quiet reminders to himself, not because he never worried, but because he refused to let worry become his ruler. One of his greatest insights was beautifully simple. The present moment is all you ever truly possess. Think about that. Yesterday exists only in memory. Tomorrow exists only in imagination. Life is always lived here. Now, imagine trying to carry an entire year's worth of water in your hands. Impossible. Yet many people try to carry an entire lifetime of problems all at once. They worry about next week before breakfast, about retirement while still in their 20s, about conversations that haven't happened, about losses that may never come. The mind becomes exhausted because it was never designed to carry time that doesn't exist. Marcus continually returned to today. Not because tomorrow didn't matter, but because today was the only place where action was possible. There is an old story about a Roman soldier standing guard through the night. A young recruit asked him, "Aren't you afraid the enemy will attack before morning?" The older soldier smiled. "If they come tonight, I'll meet them tonight. And if they come tomorrow, I'll meet them tomorrow." "But what if they come next month?" The soldier laughed gently. "Then why should I fight next month's battle tonight?" How often do we fight tomorrow's battles before sunrise? How often do we lose today's peace preparing for problems that haven't arrived? Epictetus built his entire philosophy around one powerful distinction. He taught that life can be divided into two categories. Things we can control, things we cannot. Simple, yet life-changing. You can control your effort. You cannot control every outcome. You can control your honesty. You cannot control other people's opinions. You can control your attitude. You cannot control every circumstance. Most anxiety grows from confusing those two categories. Imagine trying to stop the rain with your hands. The harder you try, the more exhausted you become. Now imagine opening an umbrella instead. You haven't stopped the rain. You've simply changed your response. That is Stoicism. It doesn't promise control over life. It teaches mastery over yourself. There is a story about a sailor crossing the Mediterranean during a fierce storm. The waves crashed over the deck. The passengers panicked. Some cried, some prayed, some believed they would never reach land. Yet the captain remained remarkably calm. One frightened passenger asked, "How can you be so peaceful?" The captain replied, "I cannot command the sea, but I can command the way I steer." That single sentence contains centuries of Stoic wisdom. The sea represents life. The storms represent uncertainty. The ship represents your character, and the captain is your mind. Seneca offered another profound lesson. He believed that people often borrow suffering from the future. Imagine receiving a bill that isn't due for 12 months. Instead of waiting, you begin paying it every single day. By the time the deadline arrives, you've paid far more than you ever owed. Anxiety works the same way. We repeatedly pay emotional interest on problems that may never become real. Seneca observed, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Notice how true this becomes when you look back on your own life. Think of something that once kept you awake at night, perhaps an exam, a job interview, a difficult conversation, maybe a medical test. At the time, it felt overwhelming. Yet here you are, still breathing, still growing, still moving forward. The fear felt permanent. It wasn't. Imagine standing beside a river. Leaves float downstream. You notice each one, but you don't jump into the water to chase every leaf. Thoughts deserve the same treatment. Anxious thoughts will appear. Fearful predictions will appear. Memories will appear. The Stoics never taught us to eliminate thoughts. They taught us not to become prisoners of them. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the mind becomes what it repeatedly practices. Practice resentment, and resentment grows stronger. Practice gratitude, and gratitude becomes easier. Practice panic, and panic arrives more quickly. Practice calm, and eventually calm becomes your natural response. There is a beautiful Japanese story about an elderly Zen master serving tea. A young man rushed into his home, speaking rapidly. My life feels out of control. My thoughts never stop. I'm always anxious. Without saying a word, the master began pouring tea into the visitor's cup. The tea reached the top, then overflowed. It spilled onto the table. The young man shouted, "Stop! The cup is already full." The master smiled. So is your mind when it is always overflowing with worry. There is no room left for peace. Silence filled the room. Sometimes wisdom doesn't come from adding more information. Sometimes it comes from creating more space. Space to breathe, space to observe, space to remember what truly matters. Imagine the sky above the clouds. Storms may cover it for a while. Darkness may hide the sun. Yet above every storm, the sky remains clear. Your mind possesses that same quiet place. Beneath anxiety, beneath fear, beneath endless thinking, there is a deeper part of you that has never been broken. The Stoics spent their lives learning how to return there. Not once, but every single day. As we continue into the next chapter, we'll explore inspiring stories from history and everyday life that reveal how ordinary people found extraordinary peace in the middle of uncertainty. Because anxiety is not proof that you are weak. It is proof that you are human, and with wisdom, practice, and patience, even the busiest mind can learn the beautiful art of becoming still. For the greatest victory is not controlling the world around you. It is discovering that, even in the middle of life's loudest storms, your own mind can become a place of quiet refuge. Imagine standing on the edge of a mountain just before dawn. Below you, a thick blanket of fog hides the valleys. You cannot see the roads. You cannot see the rivers. You cannot even see the next village. If you judged the world only by what you could see in that moment, you might believe there was nothing beyond the fog. But then the sun begins to rise. Slowly, the mist starts to disappear. The mountains emerge. The rivers sparkle. The forests return to view. Nothing in the landscape changed. Only your perspective did. Anxiety often feels exactly like that fog. It convinces us that because we cannot see the future clearly, the future must be dangerous. The Stoics believed that wisdom is not waiting for the fog to disappear. It is learning to walk with courage even while the fog remains. History offers countless examples of this quiet courage. One of the most inspiring belongs to Admiral James Stockdale, an American naval officer who spent more than 7 years as a prisoner of war. He endured isolation, uncertainty, hardship, and conditions that would have broken many people. Years later, when asked how he survived, he explained something remarkable. He never denied the reality of his situation. He didn't pretend everything would be easy, but he also refused to surrender hope. He accepted what was real while continuing to believe that he could meet each day with dignity. His attitude reflects one of the deepest Stoic principles: face reality honestly, but never surrender your inner character to it. Imagine two sailors caught in the same storm. The first spends the entire journey screaming at the waves, "This shouldn't be happening. I hate this weather. I can't believe this is happening to me." The second sailor also feels the wind. He also hears the thunder. But instead of arguing with the storm, he quietly adjusts the sails. Which sailor reaches the shore? Life asks us the same question every day. Will you waste your energy fighting reality, or will you use that energy to navigate it? There is an old Chinese story about a scholar traveling through the countryside. A violent storm forced him to seek shelter in a small farmhouse. The elderly woman living there noticed his frustration. "My journey is ruined," he complained. "I'll never arrive on time." The woman calmly poured him a cup of tea. "Listen." The scholar became quiet. Outside, rain tapped gently against the roof. The wind whispered through the trees. Birds had fallen silent. "What do you hear?" she asked. "The storm." She smiled. "I hear the earth receiving water." For the first time, the scholar realized that the same event could be seen in two completely different ways. One mind saw disaster, another saw nourishment. The world had not changed. Only the perspective had. This is one of anxiety's greatest illusions. It convinces us that our interpretation is reality. Yet psychology teaches something different. Our thoughts are powerful, but they are not always accurate. Imagine looking through a window covered in dust. Everything outside appears dull. You might believe the world has lost its color until someone wipes the glass clean. Suddenly, nothing outside has changed, only your ability to see it clearly. Your thoughts can become like that dusty window. Fear covers possibility, worry covers gratitude. Overthinking covers wisdom. Cleaning the window begins by questioning every fearful story your mind automatically creates. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. When his thoughts became heavy, he reminded himself that events themselves are neutral. It is our judgments that create much of our suffering. Imagine receiving unexpected news. Perhaps your plans suddenly change. Your first thought might be, "This is terrible." But how many times has something disappointing eventually led you somewhere better? Perhaps losing one opportunity opened the door to another. Perhaps a painful ending introduced someone who changed your life. Perhaps a failure taught you a lesson that success never could. Looking backward, life often makes sense. Looking forward, it rarely does. That uncertainty is where trust begins. There is another story about a young violinist preparing for an important audition. For months she imagined every possible mistake. She pictured forgetting the music, breaking a string, embarrassing herself. By the time the audition arrived, she was emotionally exhausted. After performing, she apologized to her teacher. "I was so anxious that I almost couldn't play." The teacher smiled kindly. "Do you know what stole your energy?" "My fear." "No, you spent 90% of your strength fighting a future that never arrived." How many of us do the same? We spend today's peace paying emotional debts for tomorrow's possibilities. The Stoics refused to live that way. They trained themselves to invest energy only where it could make a difference. Their effort, their choices, their character, everything else, they practiced releasing. Imagine holding a handful of sand. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. Now relax your hand, the sand remains. Peace often behaves the same way. The harder we demand certainty, the more anxious we become. The more willing we are to accept uncertainty, the calmer we feel. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. There is a beautiful Japanese legend about the koi fish. Most fish swim with the current because it is easier, but the koi swims upstream, not because the current disappears, but because its strength grows through resistance. Your anxiety may feel like that current. At times it will push against you. It will whisper that you are too weak, too late, too afraid, too uncertain. But every moment you choose calm instead of panic. Every moment you return your attention to the present. Every moment you refuse to believe every fearful thought. You become stronger, not because life becomes easier, because your character becomes steadier. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the obstacles standing in your path can become the very path forward. Perhaps anxiety itself can become your greatest teacher. It reminds you to slow down, to breathe, to notice what truly matters, to stop chasing complete certainty, to remember that peace has never depended on controlling tomorrow. It has always depended on meeting today with courage. As we enter our final chapter, we'll transform these timeless lessons into practical daily Stoic habits, simple practices that can help quiet an anxious mind, build emotional resilience, and create lasting inner peace, one thoughtful day at a time, because the goal is not to eliminate every storm from your life. It is to become the kind of person who can stand in the rain, look toward the horizon, and still believe that the sun is there, even when the clouds temporarily hide it. By now, you may have realized something profound. Anxiety is not your enemy. It is a messenger. It is your mind trying, sometimes clumsily, to protect you. The problem is not that your mind warns you. The problem is that it often cannot tell the difference between a real danger and an imagined one. The Stoics understood that lasting peace does not come from eliminating every anxious thought. It comes from changing your relationship with those thoughts. Imagine sitting beside a busy road. Hundreds of cars pass by every hour. Some are loud, some are quiet, some move quickly, others slow down. Would you chase every single car? Of course not. You simply watch them pass. Your thoughts deserve the same treatment. Every anxious thought is like a passing vehicle. You can notice it without climbing inside it. That simple shift changes everything. Here are 10 Stoic practices that can help you calm your mind and conquer anxiety one day at a time. 1. Return to the present moment. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that life exists only in the present. When anxiety begins asking, "What if tomorrow goes wrong?" Gently ask yourself, "What is happening right now? Can you breathe? Can you hear the sounds around you? Can you feel your feet on the ground?" Most of the time, the present moment is far safer than the future your imagination is creating. Peace begins where attention returns. 2. Separate what you can control. Take a sheet of paper and draw 2 columns, on one side write, "Within my control" on the other. Outside my control place your effort, your attitude, your honesty, your actions. In the first column, place other people's opinions, the weather, the economy, the past, and tomorrow's uncertainties. In the second, every morning, commit your energy only to the first column. The second deserves acceptance, not obsession. 3. Question every what if. Anxiety loves asking frightening questions. What if I fail? Instead of accepting the question, answer it. If I fail, I'll learn. If I struggle, I'll adapt. If life changes, I'll grow. Notice what happens. Fear loses much of its power when wisdom joins the conversation. 4. Practice daily silence. The modern world rarely stops talking. Notifications, news, social media, endless opinions. Your nervous system was never designed to process constant noise. Spend at least 10 minutes every day without distractions. No phone, no television, no music. Simply breathe. Observe your thoughts. Watch them rise and fall like waves. Silence doesn't remove anxiety overnight, but it gives peace room to grow. 5. Keep a Stoic journal every evening. Ask yourself 3 questions. What worried me today? How much of it actually happened? What did I learn? Over time, you'll begin noticing something remarkable. Most of yesterday's fears quietly disappear. The journal becomes evidence that your mind often predicts disasters that never arrive. Truth is one of anxiety's greatest healers. 6. Strengthen your body to calm your mind. The Stoics believed that caring for the body supports a disciplined mind. Go for a walk. Stretch, exercise, sleep well, drink enough water, breathe deeply. Movement reminds your nervous system that you are safe. Many anxious thoughts become quieter when the body feels steady. 7. Replace catastrophizing with curiosity. Instead of saying everything is falling apart, ask, what can this situation teach me? Every difficulty carries a lesson, perhaps patience, perhaps courage, perhaps humility, perhaps resilience. Curiosity transforms fear into growth. 8. Limit the stories you tell yourself. Remember, an event and your interpretation of that event are not the same thing. If a friend doesn't answer your message, avoid writing an entire story in your head. Wait, observe, gather facts. Most anxious stories collapse the moment reality finally arrives. 9. Practice voluntary gratitude. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself of what remained instead of obsessing over what might disappear. Each night write down 3 things you are grateful for, 3 victories, however small, 3 moments of peace you experienced today. Gratitude gently retrains the brain to notice safety instead of constantly searching for danger. 10. Accept that uncertainty is part of life. This may be the hardest lesson of all. You will never eliminate uncertainty. No one can. Not emperors, not philosophers, not scientists, not millionaires. The desire for complete certainty creates endless anxiety. Acceptance creates freedom. Imagine sailing across the ocean. You cannot command the wind, but you can learn to navigate it. That is enough. There is an old story about a monk who carried a small clay cup wherever he traveled. One day, a student accidentally dropped it. The cup shattered. The student apologized repeatedly. The monk simply smiled. "I have thanked that cup every day." The student looked confused. "Why?" "Because I knew it was already broken." The lesson wasn't about expecting loss. It was about accepting the temporary nature of everything. The Stoics called this wisdom. When you stop demanding permanence from an uncertain world, you become less frightened by change. Imagine standing beneath an ancient oak tree. Storms have bent its branches. Winters have stripped its leaves. Lightning has scarred its trunk. Yet every spring, new leaves appear. Not because life spared the tree, because the tree learned to endure. You possess that same capacity. Anxiety often convinces you that you are fragile. Reality tells a different story. Think about everything you've already survived, the difficult conversations, the painful endings, the unexpected disappointments, the sleepless nights, the seasons when you believed you wouldn't make it through. And yet, here you are, still standing, still learning, still becoming stronger. Marcus Aurelius believed that the quality of your life depends largely on the quality of your thoughts. Not because positive thinking magically changes reality, but because disciplined thinking changes how you meet reality. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be challenges. There will always be moments when fear whispers, but fear does not have to become your leader. Each day you choose calm over panic, presence over prediction, action over worry. You build a stronger mind, and that strength becomes your greatest source of peace. As we reach our final chapter, you'll discover that conquering anxiety is not about winning one dramatic battle. It is about winning hundreds of small ones, one breath, one thought, one choice, one peaceful moment at a time, because true courage is not living without fear. It is learning to walk forward with wisdom, even while fear quietly walks beside you. Imagine standing on the shore of a quiet lake just before sunrise. The water is perfectly still. It reflects the sky so clearly that you can hardly tell where the earth ends and the heavens begin. Then someone tosses a small stone into the lake. Ripples spread in every direction. The reflection disappears, but only for a moment. The water does not fight the disturbance. It does not panic. It simply allows the ripples to pass. Soon, the surface becomes calm again. Your mind is much like that lake. Life will continue throwing stones, unexpected news, financial worries, difficult conversations, health concerns, moments of uncertainty. You cannot stop every stone from falling, but you can learn not to become the ripple. That is the heart of Stoicism, not escaping life's storms. Not pretending fear doesn't exist, but discovering a place within yourself that remains steady, even while everything around you changes. Throughout this journey, we've learned something remarkable. Anxiety often promises protection, yet more often it steals the very thing it claims to preserve. It steals today's peace for tomorrow's possibilities. It convinces us that endless thinking is the same as preparation. But wisdom teaches a different lesson. Preparation comes from action, peace comes from presence, and strength comes from accepting what we cannot control while giving our best to what we can. Marcus Aurelius faced wars that threatened an empire. Epictetus endured slavery and hardship. Seneca experienced exile, political betrayal, and the uncertainty of power. None of them lived easy lives, yet all of them discovered the same truth. Circumstances do not decide the quality of your inner life. Your response does. Think back to every difficult season you've survived, the nights you believed would never end, the fear that once felt overwhelming, the uncertainty that kept you awake. Some of those moments were painful, some changed you forever, but every one of them taught you something important. You are far stronger than fear has ever allowed you to believe. There is an old story about a blacksmith forging a sword. A young apprentice watched as the glowing steel was repeatedly placed into the fire, struck by heavy hammers, and cooled in water. Unable to understand, he asked, "Why must the metal suffer so much?" The blacksmith smiled, because iron becomes a sword only after enduring what weaker metals cannot. Life shapes us in much the same way. Every challenge, every disappointment, every uncertain season, every anxious night can either make us more fearful or more resilient. The choice is not always easy, but it is always ours. Imagine climbing a mountain before dawn. The trail is steep, the air is cold, you cannot yet see the summit. There are moments when you wonder whether continuing is worth it, but with every step, something changes. Not the mountain, you. Your legs grow stronger, your breathing steadier, your confidence deeper. Eventually, you reach the top. The sunrise was always there. You simply had to keep walking long enough to see it. Peace often works the same way. It is not found all at once. It is discovered one calm choice at a time, one breath, one step, one moment, of presence after another. So today, I invite you to begin a simple challenge, a 30-day calm mind challenge. For the next month, whenever anxiety begins telling frightening stories, pause, take one slow, deep breath, then quietly ask yourself, is this happening right now or only inside my imagination? If it is only a thought, let it pass like a cloud moving across the sky. If it is a real problem, take the smallest meaningful action you can today. Nothing more, nothing less. Each evening, ask yourself these 3 questions. Did I spend more time living today or worrying about tomorrow? What anxious thought turned out not to be true? What moment of peace am I grateful for today? These questions may seem simple, but practiced every day, they quietly reshape the way you see the world. Remember, the goal is not to become someone who never feels anxious. That isn't what the Stoics taught. The goal is to become someone who is no longer controlled by anxiety, someone who feels fear but continues forward, someone who meets uncertainty with courage, someone who protects their peace. Even when the world feels chaotic, if this story has encouraged you, I have one final invitation. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What is one worry you've been carrying that you're finally ready to release? Your words might become the encouragement someone else needs today. And if you're committed to building a calmer mind, stronger character, and a more meaningful life through Stoicism, timeless philosophy, and modern psychology, subscribe and join this growing community. Every week, we explore practical wisdom that helps us become stronger not by controlling the world around us, but by mastering the world within. Before you leave, remember this. The sky has never feared the storm. It knows the clouds will pass. The ocean has never feared the waves. It knows they will return to stillness. The mountains have never feared the wind. They know they were built to endure. And you are stronger than the anxious voice inside your mind, not because fear will never visit you again, but because you now know it is only a visitor. It does not own your thoughts. It does not define your future. It does not determine your worth. Take a deep breath. Slow your mind. Trust the present moment. Walk forward with courage, because the greatest victory is not living a life without uncertainty. It is living with such wisdom, resilience, and inner peace that uncertainty no longer has the power to steal your joy. That is the quiet strength of the Stoic, and that strength has been within you all along.